Welcome to the Koenigsegg stand at the Geneva Motor Show 2014. This is a fairly extraordinary 1-1. Now, what that means, if you haven't heard already, is that it weighs 1,360 kilos and it has 1,360 horsepower. So 1 kilo to 1 horsepower. It's going to cost $2.8 million and they're only going to produce 6. Let's go and have a better look at the engine just over there. So obviously the heart of the Koenigsegg 1.1 is this, its engine. 5-litre V8 twin turbocharged, and it weighs just 197 kilos, which is fairly extraordinary. As you can see, there's an awful lot of carbon fibre on it, and one of the most extraordinary things is just down here, and it's the variable turbo, and it's been 3D printed. Now, Koenigsegg has patented this and they're particularly proud of it. They're saying they're getting really good boost from about 2,300 RPM and then full boost from about 2,800 RPM. Torque, well, it's fairly extraordinary. You've got over 1,000 pounds-foot at maximum, which is at around 6,000 RPM. But you've got about over 737 pounds-foot, I'm trying to remember my figures here, all the way from 3,000 RPM all the way up to 7,000 RPM. So it's fairly flexible, I think it's fair to say. Anyway, let's go back and have a look at some of the aerodynamics on the car. So I thought I'd do a slightly more in-depth walkthrough from the front of the car all the way to the rear and try and pick out some of the highlights. Starting in front, you've obviously got an enormous front splitter. So if you didn't know that this was going to be a track car effectively already, then that makes it fairly clear. You're going up through these dive planes here. Underneath the arches, you've got an awful lot of active aero, which obviously you can't see, but there are all sorts of flaps working. We'll get a bit more of that later as we go further down the car. The wheels, well, we saw these last year, and they're Koenigsegg's own design, and they weigh just 6 kilos, so slightly lighter at the front, they're 19s here, 20s at the rear, and they're just extraordinary. All carbon fibre. They've actually had to add 300 grams into these wheels compared to the Geneva because the car's now capable of up to 2G in the corners. 300 grams is hardly a lot, and it's still 6 kilos. The brakes, whilst we're here, ceramic pistons in these, and Koenigsegg are pretty proud of these. They're claiming 400 kilometers an hour, so that's what, 248 miles an hour to 0 in 10 seconds. That's what they're claiming. That's mind-blowing. I can't really think about that. Moving further down the car, you might think that a lot of the aero is just the obvious sort of front splitter, rear wing, but there are actually significant changes over the standard Geneva. Things like this down here, obviously sucking the air out down the side, and well, nicely this just beautifully turned on the side there. I'm gonna open the door. I still love that door. It's pure theatre. Carbon fibre chassis with a honeycomb interior inspired by F1, and we'll talk a bit more about the interior in a minute. Moving further down the car this way, you can see this rear wing, which you've got a cutaway of it actually sort of moving, which you can adjust by the app, which is quite cool. And there's a direct rod through here, which is for the actuators. It's 600 kilos at 200 kilometers an hour, so 124 miles an hour. It's active aero, and it's also active suspension in here. The engine, which obviously just talks about dry sump, I've got to say earlier, and it's flex fuel as well, which Koenigsegg has obviously worked with for some time. Also worth mentioning this down here, 3D printed titanium. Actually, one other thing I should have mentioned before we go and have a look inside is, of course, the performance figures. Now, Koenigsegg is probably sort of sometimes misunderstood as just a straight line car, but nonetheless, the figures they're quoting are just extraordinary. They're saying 0 to 400 kilometers an hour, so that is, what as you say, it's 248 miles an hour in around 20 seconds. They know it'll do 21, 22, but they want it to be 20 seconds because it's a nice round figure. Just to put that into context, the Bugatti Supersport will do the same 0 to 400 figure in about 45 seconds. So yeah, that's less than half the time. Anyway, let's go and have a look at the interior. The interior of the Koenigsegg 1.1 is, well, you might expect it to be really sparse given that it's sort of, track-orientated car, but there's some really cool things in here that are still pretty luxurious. These seats, for example, extremely lightweight, carbon fibre, but they've trimmed them with, the padding in them is temper, which those of you who've bought a mattress recently might know is a sort of, I suppose, the best memory foam you can get effectively. You could say they're from a mattress, as Christian Koenigsegg pointed out, you could also say they're from NASA because they use exactly the same technology. The rest of it in here, well, you've got air conditioning, you've also got 3G, which will link up to an app. And Christian again showing me on his phone, you can check which windows, you can put the windows up and down, change the aero, you can see if doors are open, you can also check your lap times if you've been around the Nürburgring, G-forces, top speed, pretty much anything you want. For such a small company, I think that's one of the really impressive things about Koenigsegg, is just how much they've developed in-house and how much technology they've got that all looks so beautifully resolved. I think this could be the most exciting car of the entire show. Obviously, if you disagree, then leave your comments in the box below here, and I will try and check back and have a look. Also, remember to obviously subscribe to this channel if you don't already, because we're going to be putting a load more videos up throughout the next 2 days, and it's the only way you'll make sure you don't miss any of them.